All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining me today. We're going to be talking about Sensee Braille products. Sensee is a company based out of Korea that has given us some of their materials, and I've had the opportunity to use them. So that's what we'll be discussing today. Really briefly about me. My name is Claire Feinberg. I'm a teacher for the visually impaired from Foundation for Blind Children. I work as an itinerant provider and I serve the greater Phoenix area. I got my bachelor's in psychology from NAU in Arizona, and I got my master's in special education in teaching the visually impaired from University of Arizona in Tucson. And this is going on my 4th year of working with Foundation for Blind Children. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. So Sensee is a company that their main mission is continuous research on the world that the visually impaired and non-disabled can see and enjoy together, and the challenge of solving fundamental problems. They consist of families of the visually impaired and the visually impaired, and it was a company that was established to create a world where everyone can enjoy together. They are dedicated to bringing people together in everyday opportunities that happen, and they hope to create meaningful materials, things that everybody can enjoy and nobody's excluded from enjoying. And they also hope to just provide the basic materials that are accessible for everyone. So I would just be interested to know, before we get into the products from Sensee, what Braille curriculum everybody is using right now. So for example, I use Mangold Braille curriculum with a few of my students, but I would just be interested to learn what everyone else is using with their Braille learners. I see Mangold. Depends on the student, yeah. I've had experience with Mangold and building on patterns. Cool. All right. I'm always interested to know that because there's so many different options for us, and it truly does depend on the student. So it's just nice to see. And sometimes there's things that you've not heard of, and people may have different experiences to share. Cool. Okay. So, like I said, Sensee is a Korean-born company, and so we were given the opportunity to try out some of their products. They gave us a few different products. So first I'm going to talk about the Braille books that they've given us. So we received 3 of them. They look like this. Hold them up to the camera up there. What I really appreciate about the books that we received is that they were created for students with visual impairments. So they weren't books that were adapted after the fact. They were books that were actually created for our students who are visually impaired to enjoy with their peers, their friends, their families that are maybe not visually impaired or also visually impaired themselves. So one of the features of their books that I appreciate is that the text is off center from the print. I don't know if anyone's had the experience of reading a book with a Braille reader and you're trying to read the print at the same time, but the print is overlaid on the Braille. Or the Braille's overlaid on the print. So what's really cool about their books is they make it a point to have the Braille and the print spaced out enough so that you can actually read together. So we received a few of these books, and they're created in a way that you can participate in reading with someone who's reading Braille if you're a print reader as well. So on the screen, I have just a few of the pictures that I pulled from their website where you can see the Braille is above the print, and the illustrations next to the Braille graphics that they have provided. So that's just a few examples of their Braille books. And then I'll talk a little bit about my experience with their Braille books. So in using these books with my students, I found that they were really great for kind of gauging comprehension with some of my early Braille students. A lot of the books are picture books, and the sentences were short and concise. They kind of remind me of early readers that you might use with an emerging print reader, like the Bob books. Bob sat on a mat. So the sentences are short and simple like that in their print books and in Braille. I think that they could also be used easily for knowledge checks by print reading teachers who may be using these books with their students, which is really nice. I know a lot of the time teachers that I work with who are in general education can be intimidated by Braille, so these are really not intimidating books at all. It's not a Braille and then a print companion. You could kind of say the same for any print book that has the Braille overlay, but I like that these kind of stand out to me because you could be reading at the same time as your Braille reader. You're not kind of like looking around their fingers to see, you know, what the next word is, do they get it correct, which I really like about them. I think that these books also promote inclusion in the classroom. I've been able to have my students read along with their peers in class more using these because you can see the print and the Braille at the same time, so their peers could be reading and they could be taking turns reading. And I also think it just builds a sense of community when our students are able to participate in activities with their peers that they might have otherwise been excluded from, like in terms of like peer reading, shared reading, and things like that. I also think that you could easily include these Braille books in a gen ed, classroom library. And it kind of creates an opportunity of more togetherness and community. Instead of, peers having their books and then we have our Braille books, these are things that could easily be integrated into the library, and a print reading student could pull this out and read it and just have the exposure to the Braille that's on the pages. And then also having them available for the Braille readers. So yeah, so that is my experience with their Braille books. My students love them. The stories are super cute. My mom and my dad ones are definitely the fan favorites for my students, but I will move on to the next part of the materials we received from Sensee. So the next thing that we received are these coloring books. So the coloring books are tactile raised line pictures. And then the backs of the pictures can also be used for tracing because the line is raised and then you can feel the indentation where the line is on the other side. And then you have the print description of the picture on the top, and then there's also the Braille description. And these could be, again, used for students with visual impairments or without visual impairments. And they're super fun. And so I will tell you a little bit about ways that I've used them in my so go next. Okay. So I found these to be an excellent source of Braille practice for my students. So not only is there practice with the actual Braille titles on the page, but I've done a few different activities with my students where we've done direct practice with Braille. So I have some students where their peers will get a coloring page and it's almost like a color by number where they'll have a section of a drawing and it'll have like a letter or a sight word or a number or a digraph or a letter blend that represents a color. So if you see the word the, you have to color that area red. So I've been able to kind of take those ELA activities that their sighted peers are doing in class and do the same for them on these coloring pages because they can actually feel the boundaries of the sections that they're coloring, which is really fun. I also like these for exposure to graphics. So what's nice about the coloring books is there's a few different topics that they cover, from animals to, we have one about vehicles, and then there's also one about food. And what's cool is they're able to have exposure to graphics before they get that first math textbook, and they're expected to, understand how to tactually interpret a graph. So understanding how to kind of tactually navigate a picture without their first experience being something really intimidating has been a nice experience for a lot of my students. And it's also exposure to concepts. So for example, the vehicle one, I was just actually having a conversation with one of the teachers at one of my schools who asked, how do our students determine the difference between a car versus a bus versus a plane. And so the vehicle book has all of those subjects listed, and it creates opportunity to have conversations about, these different vehicles of transportation. And then, students can ask questions, and we can build lessons based off of the topics as well that are in the books. I think it's incredible that they can have inclusion in leisure time when their peers are having leisure time. I know a lot of the time if students have free time in class and the teacher says everybody can color, my students will sometimes just pick up a piece of white paper and kind of meaninglessly scribble, which is fine and it's fun, but being able to give them like meaningful leisure activities that they can enjoy has been life-changing for a lot of them, and they're always excited when we get to pull this out, and it's like a fun way to address the ECC. So all of my students are huge fans of these, and whenever we have free time, instead of just requesting, we listen to a YouTube video or just something not as meaningful, they're able to actually participate in some meaningful leisure activities, which is nice. And then last but not least, the last product that we got to try out is the Braille education. So it comes in a big box like this. I'm gonna put these. And in the kit, we have these kind of hard, what would you call this? Like a board book. And in the board book, when you open it, it has a little explanation about the Braille cell and how we identify different letters and how the dot formations work. And then when you get to the actual pages, there is the letter, the Braille cell, and a picture. And for the Braille cell, they are magnetic, but only are magnetic in the correct dot formation. So for example, in the letter A, only dot one would be magnetic. And the magnets that the students use are these little Peapod magnets. And they just take them out and unclip them. And they will only stick to the part that has the correct dot formation. So for A, it will only stick to dot one. If you tried sticking it to another dot, it would just fall off the page. And it's also tactile. So if a student was feeling for the correct dot formation, there's bumps to indicate this is the correct cell to place the magnet in. And so there's also print magnet tiles that fall into the outline of the print letter. If the student was participating in this with, a peer that maybe is not visually impaired. What I really like about these is they are a super a non-abstract way of representing a Braille cell. It's nice that the students can look at it and it's concrete that I should only have a dot in the position 1 for the A, whereas I think sometimes for our students, things like muffin tin Braille and the swing cell Braille can be a little bit more abstract, and this is more concrete in terms of I see the dot, I place the magnet, it only sticks where it's supposed to. This has been incredibly helpful for me, especially with some of my students that have multiple disabilities. So they may have a vision impairment and a hearing impairment. And so for me, I've found that those students are super receptive to having like multiple representations of the letter, and having more of a concrete, I know that these two dots are the only ones where the magnet goes, so I know that B is dot 1 and dot 2. And it's super fun. So these books, the alphabet is split up into two parts. So we have A through M, and then M through Z is its own separate book. And then we also have UEB numbers. And then we also have a blank template where you can test your students' knowledge without having the kind of hints and clues of the board book. And I will go ahead and talk a little bit more about my experience with it. So I think it's incredibly accessible for our Braille learning students and our students that may be learning print and Braille interchangeably. I know for a fact, like even my students that are strictly Braille, they're always very curious about print letters. And so even just having the outline where they could actually feel and trace their letter if they're curious about what print letters feel like has been nice to have. But then also it's been very accessible for my students that are maybe low vision but learning Braille as well. I think it's incredibly interactive, and even students who are in a classroom where they have peers around who are interested in what they're doing, they can come up and participate with the students, and they'll take turns. My student will place the Braille, and then their peer might place the print letter, help them place the print letter, and then sometimes even help them, describe like, oh, for A, there's a picture of an apple, and it's like a picture of a red, juicy apple. So they're able to kind of translate and describe the picture for some of my students. I also think this is very different than all of the other Braille programs and Braille materials that I've seen before. And it's bottom line, it's very fun to use, and all of my students enjoy when I pull the box out and they get to use it. But I definitely think that it's supplemental. So I wouldn't recommend this to someone and say, you are going to be able to teach your student all Braille just using these books, coloring sheets, and board books. But I do think that this is something that can be worked into lessons where it doesn't necessarily feel like you're doing learning, and it's fun, but there is some residual learning that's happening with these materials. I think my overall experience with all these materials was incredibly positive. I really appreciate that it was created with and for the visually impaired community, and that people who are visually impaired were included in the creation of these materials, and it really shows when you're using them. It's just like the little things like that the print is separate so far away from the Braille that you can read together at the same time. It really creates meaningful opportunities, and you can tell that it was created intentionally. Something about Sensee, so they use AI technology to create some of their products, and they really hope by doing so that they can decrease the amount of time it takes to create Braille products and decrease the cost of Braille products as well, which is a nice initiative from the company. Again, I do think it's a supplemental product, but that being said, it's an amazing supplemental product. I could even see not even just necessarily using this with students who are learning Braille, but I think this would be great for in-services with teachers who maybe are new to having a student who's a Braille learner, and kind of explaining it to them through showing them these board books and how a Braille cell works, because it really is super concrete. And I think it's good for exposure for our students' peers who maybe have not had a Braille learner in their class before, being able to see, oh, this is how my friend reads, being able to read with them, being able to color with them, being able to explore, creating letters with them. They're creating them in print the same way our students are doing it in Braille. I love them for inclusion because everybody's drawn to them. Every time I break these out in the classroom, it's like a swarm of peers come around because they want to help, our student put the print letter where the print letter belongs, which is really nice. And I also think it's really nice for building an understanding for our Braille learners and then for just people around them. I mean, I could even see introducing this for parents so that they could practice learning Braille too. It's a really intimidating way to look at Braille because you have so many representations of the letters. So yeah. That being said, so Sensee, like I said, it's a Korean-born company. You can purchase materials from their website, but you have to reach out to their customer service to purchase it from the website. I've found them on Amazon, and I believe the prices, so for the coloring books, I believe they were 3 for $40 and 1 for $12. And then the learning kit, I believe, was $180. But I also know their mission is to decrease the cost of these materials, so I'm sure they seem to be a new company. So once there's more kind of recognition, hopefully those costs will go down. But yeah, about $180 for the Braille learning kit and then $40 for 3 of the coloring books. But there are a lot of pages in the coloring books too. Yeah, are there any questions? Yeah. We were very lucky and they had delivered some to us and we just had the opportunity to try them out. They're super cool. Okay, cool. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.